In 1981, David Kerwin was driving through Yellowstone's hot springs with his friend Ronald Ratcliffe and Ronald's dog Moosey. At some point, they parked their car for a better look, but Moosey suddenly jumped into one of the hot springs and started yelping. Even though many people warned him not to jump into the near boiling water, David dove straight in and attempted to rescue the suffering dog. He grabbed Moosey and made it close to the edge before letting go and sinking until his friend pulled him back out. Immediately afterwards, David muttered, "That was stupid. How bad am I? That was a stupid thing I did." He was immediately blinded since the hot spring had melted his eyeballs, and when someone helped to pull his shoe off, his skin came off with it. He sustained third-degree burns over 100% of his body and died the next day after living his final hours in agonizing pain. Sadly, Moosey the dog also did not survive. A restaurant in Bangkok has been continuously cooking and serving from the same soup for over 45 years. Known as perpetual stew, new ingredients are added every day to continuously evolve the flavor over time. As a result of its burning sulfur, the Indonesian volcano of Kawah Ijen is the only volcano in the world with blue lava. Sunken World War II ships at the bottom of the ocean are actually extremely valuable. They're one of the only sources of steel in the world that remains uncontaminated by nuclear radiation. Here's an amazing photo of a diver at Silfra Fissure in Iceland touching North America and Europe at the same time. Filet mignon, hoo-hoo. The Atacama Desert in northern Chile is said to be the oldest and driest desert in the world. But every 5 years or so, the arid landscape explodes with plant life during a rare phenomenon known as desert bloom. Here are some morbidly wholesome facts about Robin Williams. When Sharon Osbourne was sick in bed with cancer and giving up, Ozzy asked Robin Williams to come visit her. Robin randomly hopped in her sick bed, and her family instantly went from crying to laughing hysterically. Robin cheered her up so much that she went back to chemo the very next day. When Superman actor Christopher Reeve was left paralyzed after a horse riding accident, Robin Williams was one of the first people to visit him in the hospital. He came in dressed as a doctor and told Reeve he was there to give him a rectal exam, causing him to laugh for the first time in weeks. When Robin Williams first met Coco the gorilla in 2001, he made her smile for the first time in 6 months. When Robin died in 2014, Coco overheard the news and said the word cry in sign language. Princess Diana didn't die immediately at the scene of her car accident, but instead died 5 hours later due to a tear in the pulmonary vein of her heart. She would have had an 80% chance of surviving the crash if she had just been wearing her seatbelt.
Male genital transplant surgeons typically exclude the testicles when performing a transplant. This is because the deceased donor would become the biological father of any future babies produced by that nutsack.
In 2018, American missionary John Allen Chow illegally traveled to North Sentinel Island so that he could preach Christianity to an uncontacted tribe. He was well aware that the Sentinelese people were extremely violent towards outsiders, but he believed that God would protect him. Before he even stepped foot on land, he was greeted with an arrow through the heart. In 1967, line worker Randall Champion accidentally grabbed a high-voltage line, instantly electrocuting himself and stopping his heart. That's when fellow lineman J.D. Thompson immediately rushed over and performed CPR until paramedics arrived. Champion ended up surviving, and this famous photo became known as the Kiss of Life. This beach in Turkey is one of the only beaches in the world that's accessible to handicapped people. When she was 7 years old, Christina Santhouse was diagnosed with a life-threatening condition that forced doctors to remove half of her brain. But she miraculously grew up to earn a master's degree and now works as a professional speech pathologist. The shaman of Bad Dürrenberg was a middle-aged woman who was buried around 9,000 years ago in what is now central Germany. Believed to have been a person of great prestige, she was buried with an extraordinary headdress that was made from the bones and teeth of various animals such as deer, cranes, turtles, and wild boar. This incredible video shows archaeologists opening an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus in front of a crowd of people. The coffin contained the body of an ancient priest and had been sealed for over 2,500 years up until this point. In 2020, a massive canvas filled with thousands of Ice Age drawings was found in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. The incredible artwork includes handprints, geometric designs, and a wide array of extinct animals. It spans for nearly 8 miles, and some of the drawings are estimated to be up to 12,600 years old. According to his former doctor, Michael Jackson's father had him chemically castrated as a young boy. He reportedly did this so that Michael would maintain his high-pitched singing voice into adulthood. The skin of certain fish species can be grafted onto severe burns and diabetic wounds. The material recruits the body's own cells and is eventually converted into living tissue. Located in Paris, this is the tomb of legendary scientist Marie Curie. It's lined with an inch thick of lead since her remains are still radioactive to this day. A Nile crocodile named Gustave has killed as many as 300 people in Burundi over the last 50 years. He's evaded dozens of capture and murder attempts as he can be identified by the 3 bullet scars on his body. The 2,000-pound monster croc is already nearly 20 feet long and is said to be still growing to this day. If you were dying from the plague during the 16th century, this is what the doctor who treated you would have worn. During this time period, it was believed that smelling odors such as rotting corpses was what made people sick. So the beak was filled with a mixture of herbs meant to purify the air the doctor was breathing. This breathtaking staircase at the Chambord Castle in France was designed by Leonardo DiCaprio in the year 1516. This massive two-handed sword was created for Prince Elector Maximilian II in 1689. The blade of this incredible weapon was made completely out of the snout of a sawfish. Contractors in Marino, Italy were excavating for a new McDonald's when they came across a 2,000-year-old road from ancient Rome. Once excavations were complete, they built a glass floor in the restaurant to showcase the amazing discoveries. While filming for The Grinch, the thick makeup and prosthetics made Jim Carrey feel like he was buried alive each day. It became so brutal for him that they had to hire a former CIA agent to teach him techniques for coping with torture. The Grinch as a kid was played by an 18-year-old actor with dwarfism who sadly died from heart failure just 2 years after the movie released. Many of the indoor scenes in the movie Elf were shot inside an abandoned mental asylum in Canada called Riverview Hospital. All of the characters in Tim Burton's A Nightmare Before Christmas were inspired by hallucinations he had during a fever that nearly killed him. South Park's Mr. Hanky the Christmas Poo originated from when Trey Parker was potty training at age 4. His father would tell him that if he didn't flush his Mr. Hanky down the toilet, it would come to life and kill him in his sleep. This 1994 photo shows O.J. Simpson holding hands with his children at the funeral of their mother and his ex-wife, Nicole Simpson Brown. She was brutally stabbed to death, most likely by O.J. himself, even though he was famously acquitted in court a few months later. During the funeral, O.J. reportedly spent a significant amount of time with Nicole's body and was even seen kissing her on the lips. Up until 1974, it was illegal to appear in public in the city of Chicago if you were ugly, and each offense was subject to a fine. The law was primarily made to prevent people with disabilities from going outside. While on his deathbed and completely unable to speak due to throat cancer, famous author Aldous Huxley wrote his final request to his wife to be given 100 micrograms of LSD. So she injected him with 2 separate doses of acid, and he died just a few hours later while tripping balls. Nem was a heavy user. He would swallow handfuls of pills without even knowing what they were. In 2007, he once overdosed on so much methadone that doctors informed him he was only 2 hours away from dying. It was such a wake-up call that he quit drugs almost immediately and has remained sober ever since. American soldier Henry Gunther was the last man to die during World War I. At 10:59 a.m. on November 11, 1918, he bravely charged at a German roadblock filled with armed soldiers. The Germans tried waving him off, knowing that the armistice would be signed within a few moments. But he apparently got too close, fired a couple rounds, and was killed instantly. The dog on the left is an award-winning French bulldog named Arnie. The dog on the right is also a French bulldog, but he was bred in the Netherlands by Hawbuck's Kennel. They're a breeder trying to establish a new, healthier template for French bulldogs, which are typically prone to overheating and breathing problems directly related to their flat facial structure. Here's an 1889 photo of a blind Muslim man named Muhammad carrying his best friend, a paralyzed Christian man with dwarfism named Samir. Despite their opposing religious views, each man depended on the other to survive. In 2017, a family swimming at Panama City Beach in Florida was suddenly swept out to sea by a strong rip current. Since there was no lifeguard on duty, over 100 beachgoers formed a human chain to pull the drowning family to safety. In May of this year, a Mercedes-Benz became the most valuable car of all time, selling for a staggering $142 million at auction. It's a 1955 300 SLR Uhlenhaut coupe that's in immaculate condition, and only 2 of them were ever made. Here's an amazing photograph of Earth, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn in a perfect straight line across the sky. This unique 5-planet lineup only happens once every 20 years, the most recent one being this past June. In 2002, the Netherlands built a unique bridge called the Veluwemeer Aqueduct that allows boats to pass over the highway. This person got up close and personal with an extremely rare albino humpback whale off the coast of Australia. The famous whale is named Migaloo, and being this close to him can fetch you a $16,000 fine. In 1969, when African American citizens were forbidden from swimming in pools with white people, Mr. Rogers invited a black police officer to come dip his feet in a pool with him, breaking a well-known color barrier. Mr. Rogers personally responded to every fan letter he ever received. A 5-year-old blind girl once asked if he could say when he's feeding the fish because she was worried about them starving. From that point on, every time he fed the fish, he said it out loud. In the 1980s, a little girl named Beth was suffering from over 100 seizures per day and was about to have half her brain removed in a major surgery. So her mother requested a note from Mr. Rogers just to assure the little girl that she'd be okay. When Mr. Rogers heard about this, he flew to visit her in the hospital and even brought his puppets to cheer her up. Beth survived the surgery and stayed close with Mr. Rogers until his death. This Norwegian building that looks like it has legs was used in the 18th century to store grains. It was propped up with wooden platforms to protect the grain from water damage and pests. Uncombable hair syndrome is an extremely rare condition that literally makes the hair impossible to comb. It currently affects less than 100 people across the globe. In 1960, David Latimer planted a garden inside of a giant glass bottle and opened it just once to water it in 1972. Amazingly, this self-contained ecosystem continues to flourish more than 50 years later. This rare Australian Wagyu tomahawk is making my tummy growl as we speak. In 1986, Romanian sewer workers accidentally stumbled upon a cave that had been sealed off for over 5 million years. The alien-like ecosystem is based completely on chemosynthesis and is home to more than 30 species that can't be found anywhere else on Earth. In 1969, an astrologer warned John Lennon that he would be shot on an island. John was so disturbed by this that it caused him to cancel an upcoming yacht trip around the Greek islands. 11 years later, John Lennon was shot and killed on the island of Manhattan. These natural ice formations in Antarctica look like structures built by the ancient Romans. This 3,000-year-old clay pig was found 2 years ago at the Lian ruins of China. Internet users immediately pointed out that it looked oddly similar to the pigs from Angry Birds. An LA couple was ecstatic to see the first ultrasound of their baby until they realized that he looked exactly like Donald Trump. The shadow of this sign in Devon, England closely resembles a person being hanged. Coincidentally, it's located near a spot called Dead Man's Cross, where criminals were hanged from a gallows in the 13th century. Named the Merchant of Death, Russian arms dealer Victor Bout rose to power after the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s. Using his fleet of 60 cargo planes, the arms he's brokered have helped fuel conflicts in countries including Afghanistan, Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Rwanda, Liberia, Sudan, and Sierra Leone. Willing to sell weapons to anyone who wanted them, Bout has supplied both sides of multiple civil wars and is said to be responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. He was arrested during a sting operation in 2008 where he was caught selling surface-to-air missiles that would have been used to kill American troops. But Victor Bout is now free thanks to a prisoner swap for WNBA player Brittany Griner, who was arrested 6 months ago after trying to bring a THC cartridge on a Russian airplane. In 2005, a wild gorilla in the remote Congolese forest was seen using a stick to test the water depth of a swamp. She was then observed using it as a walking stick to help her cross the body of water, making her the first documented case of a wild gorilla seen using tools. This absolute gentleman of a grizzly bear was videotaped fixing a traffic cone before continuing on his way. What a good guy. In the early 2000s, a man who suffered multiple strokes tried to teach his cat how to dial 911. Unsure if the training stuck, one day the man fell from his wheelchair during a seizure. Police received a silent call from the house and arrived to find the man incapacitated with no one around except his cat. This amazing photograph captured the moment a wild orangutan reached out to help a conservationist who was stuck in a river. It was taken in Malaysia, where the man was searching for dangerous snakes in the area to protect the local apes. Archerfish have been known to prey on land-based insects and small animals by shooting them with a jet of water. Here's some incredibly disturbing footage of a raven speaking human.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Good boy.
I hate it. Domestic dogs are one of the only species of animal that can understand the human gesture of pointing. Other animals such as wolves and primates don't realize that pointing means to look in that direction and will only be interested in your outstretched finger. In 2007, Nicolas Cage bought a Tyrannosaurus skull for $276,000 after winning a bidding war with Leonardo DiCaprio. But upon later finding out that the skull had been stolen from Mongolia, Cage immediately turned it over to authorities. While in prison, Unabomber Ted Kaczynski received an invite to the 50-year reunion of his graduating class at Harvard. He RSVP'd, listing his occupation as prisoner and his 8 life sentences as awards. In 1979, the FBI formed a fake company which attempted to bribe members of Congress. About 25% of them accepted the bribe and were convicted. In 2007, a thief drove a $300,000 Porsche through the glass window of a luxury car showroom. After running out of gas almost immediately, he abandoned the car nearby. But the thief held on to the keys, brought a can of gas to the police station, and stole the car again. Christopher Reeve was left paralyzed after a horse riding accident. Robin Williams was one of the first people to visit him in the hospital. Dressed as a doctor with a thick accent, he told Reeve he was there to give him a rectal exam, causing him to laugh for the first time in weeks. When the Titanic sank in 1912, there were 3 dogs that made it safely onto a lifeboat and ended up surviving. In 1998, American father John Crowley was told that his 2 babies had an incurable genetic disorder that would kill them in less than a year. But John refused to accept this, so he launched a biotech company even though he had no prior experience in the field. The company would go on to create an experimental enzyme therapy that would save the lives of his kids and many others. Nearly 25 years later, both of them are still alive today. In 1999, a Florida waitress was tipped a lottery ticket and won $10 million. She was then sued by her colleagues for their share before being sued by the man who tipped her the ticket. That same week, she was kidnapped by her ex-husband and ended up shooting him in the chest when he threatened to kill her. She then spent the next 10 years fighting a legal battle against the IRS, which she eventually won. A man from New Jersey once bought a $5 bottle of orange juice from ShopRite, but his wife made him return it because it was too expensive. He then decided to buy 2 Powerball tickets with the refunded money and ended up winning the $300 million jackpot. In 1984, a regular customer at a pizzeria asked his waitress to help him pick the lottery numbers. He won, came back, and true to his word, tipped her half of the $6 million prize. Shortly after returning from the moon, Buzz Aldrin fell into deep depression and addiction. He was quoted saying, "I wanted to resume my duties, but there were no duties to resume. There was no goal, no sense of calling, no project worth pouring myself into." Police in Pakistan are searching for a religious healer who reportedly convinced a pregnant woman that hammering a 2-inch nail into her skull would help her give birth to a boy. The woman became desperate after her husband threatened to divorce her if she gave birth to another girl for the 4th time. Lucy Studi from Iowa claims that her late father was a serial killer who murdered up to 70 women throughout the 70s and 80s. She told authorities that the man forced his kids to help bury the bodies, many of them thrown into a well that's since been filled in. Police aren't exactly sure how to approach it, especially since Lucy's sister says she's lying about the whole thing. Japan has always been known for its wacky game shows, but in 1998, one particular show took this to the extreme. A man nicknamed Nasubi was selected to be locked inside of an apartment with nothing but a supply of water and thousands of magazines. He was challenged to enter mail-in sweepstakes until he won about $10,000 in prizes. But he was given no food, no clothes, and no form of human contact. His only means of survival were the items he won from the magazines. The man was told it was only experimental and that he was to record himself for a later broadcast. But in reality, his entire experience was live streamed to an audience of tens of millions of people to watch and make fun of. There were times when Nasubi went weeks without food and was fortunate to win items such as dog food and uncooked rice. On one occasion, he won a can of spaghetti after starving for days, but he couldn't eat it since he didn't have a can opener. When Nasubi would break down mentally and cry in front of the camera, the show's producers would play a laugh track to the audience so that they would find it funny. After 355 days of pure isolation and torture, Nasubi had achieved his goal, but the show had become far too popular for producers to end. So in the middle of the night, he was blindfolded and taken to a new apartment, where he was given the task of winning enough magazine prizes to win a plane ticket back home. This goal was revised several times to the point where it took Nasubi an extra 3 months to finally win the game show. He was again blindfolded and brought to a final apartment where the walls suddenly dropped and he was met with a massive live audience. Still naked and confused, Nasubi would soon realize that his endeavors were live broadcasted the entire time. The entire experiment lasted about 15 months in total, and the horrific show broke many TV records with a peak of about 17 million viewers each night. For months and even years after the ordeal, Nasubi reported being uncomfortable in clothing and struggled heavily with human interaction. A little girl from Seattle became friends with a group of crows that she feeds in exchange for gifts. The items they bring her are typically shiny and have included pieces of glass, buttons, and even lost jewelry. It's one of the first recorded cases of birds giving gifts to humans. In fact, crows are one of the smartest non-primate animals on the planet. Research has shown that they're aware of what they know and can ponder the content of their own minds, a level of analytical thought that scientists used to think only belonged to humans and higher mammals. They've discovered the use of basic tools, understand how stoplights and vending machines work, and have long-term facial recognition skills, meaning if you piss off a crow, it can end up holding a grudge against you for years. Crows have even been known to hold funerals and will avoid areas that are deemed dangerous for birds, meaning they understand the concept of death and fear it. New Zealand broadcaster Orini Kaipara is the first TV journalist in the world with a face tattoo. It's a traditional face marking worn by female descendants of the Maori, the indigenous Polynesian people of what is now New Zealand. Here's a rare view of Niagara Falls when it was completely dried up in 1969 for the first time in 12,000 years. Knickers the Australian steer has been deemed too big to be slaughtered. Standing at 6'4" and weighing nearly 3,000 pounds, the cow is so massive that it wouldn't even fit in the butchering equipment. Sadly, this other cow wasn't so lucky since it was turned into a deliciously rare flank steak. In 2015, an 87-year-old Chinese woman visited doctors to address the 5-inch horn growing out of her forehead that began as a mole. It's made out of the same material as fingernails and can be easily trimmed down in the same way. This photo of Sean and Michael McQuilkin was taken at Sequoia National Park just seconds before they were struck by lightning in 1975. All three, including their photographer sister, survived the strike, but younger brother Sean suffered third-degree burns and spent nearly 6 months in a coma after having an allergic reaction to asthma medicine in 2009. Tennessee woman Shanina Isom has been suffering from a mysterious skin condition that causes her to grow fingernails in place of her hair. In 2004, 200 women armed with kitchen knives stormed into an Indian courthouse before stabbing and murdering Akuya Dav, a gang leader, serial killer, and rapist who kept escaping his sentencing due to bribes. Every single woman later claimed responsibility for killing him. When a predatory producer assaulted one of her friends, Carrie Fisher sent him a Tiffany box with a severed cow tongue inside. She also left a note inside that read, "The next delivery will be something of yours in a much smaller box." When Britain changed the packaging of Tylenol to blister packs instead of bottles, the suicide rate from Tylenol declined by nearly 50%. Anyone who wanted a lethal dose of 50 pills now had to push them out one by one instead of easily dumping them out from a bottle. In 2013, a 60-year-old Japanese truck driver found out he was accidentally switched at birth in a Tokyo hospital in 1953. His biological parents were very wealthy, and the infant who took his place grew up to own a successful real estate company. Meanwhile, the original son was raised by a poor single mother and struggled with poverty throughout his entire life.